Carolina. Tremendous resource. Ray mentioned him several times. I'm going to let Matt tell us about putting it all together, building an adaptive grazing system. So, Matt, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. And wow, yeah, this works better. Ray, thank you, Ray, and thank you, Ray. And really glad to be here today and for this whole week. It's been already been a long week, and we've got some days to go here, but certainly enjoy coming to Kentucky and working with my friends here. And Chris has come work on our pasture ecology school now this year and in the future. So really excited to have that opportunity. And of course, Greg, we're doing a lot of bale grazing work now across the region and all kinds of exciting things. But my opportunity today to try to pull some of this together, and I will say we didn't really compare presentations, and there's a lot of overlap between mine and Ray's and Chris's and Alan's, and so I'm not going to try to go back through today. When I hit something that we've already covered, I'm going to go quickly because we are behind time and we want to get you guys out of here. But Ray Archuleta, I appreciate you saving some time by telling the story of Ray's Crazy Mix, because that was a very important formation during my career. But there's a little more to that story, and I won't make it long. But really, that was an example of citizen science. And our farmers participated in a reiterative process over 5 years to develop what is now Ray's Crazy Mix. It started in that van, but through getting feedback from farmers, we were able to develop a very good mix without the maybe 25 years of research that it would have taken it in the conventional way. So we do need you all to be involved in making observations and participating in on-farm research. And Dr. Franz Lubers is just an example of kind of what I believe will be a growing opportunity for you to be involved directly in research on your farms. So keep aware of those kind of opportunities. So I will start by telling you a little bit about the Amazing Grazing program. We have been doing this now in North Carolina for 37 years since Amazing Grazing was founded. When I came to work, now 34 years ago, I thought that my colleagues were a little bit crazy. Jim Green at the time was the ringleader of that. But he was well ahead of his time in terms of that. And so over the years, I'm glad to have been able to keep that program going. And our goal is to really get farmers to realize that there is something really important and special about pasture ecology. And that's really our goal, because what we found is that once you get somebody to be aware of that and to realize that and to take interest in that, everything else follows. And if you get people interested in a single practice or a few practices without understanding the principles and without... Chris, this is not going to work either, I think, but let me have that mic right there. That's the wrong one here. Take that. Okay, let's see if this works better. And I'm actually a musician, and I'm a lot more comfortable with it this way. So, but Amazing Grazing, again, we're trying to get people interested in pasture ecology, and we've been able to do that. So, appreciate the opportunity over the years to work within our CS and train over. Okay, and we've trained over 500 in our CS professionals in that school with the help of people like Ray and Alan and many others. So that's kind of what Amazing Grazing is. We do all kinds of on-farm workshops and research around the state and now around the region, really. But to me, it's something a little bit different. And every now and then we go out and we hit a farm where it's all coming together, Ray. And when you go to those farms and realize that it's a system. It's not just good grass. It's just not good cattle. It's not technology like polywire and that sort of thing. It's something that's working all together, and the farmer generally sees it as one thing rather than a collection of a bunch of little pieces. And we see examples of this all over the place. But this particular one is my cattle and a farm that I go to every single day that I'm in North Carolina, which not today, but I've got somebody that's going there for me today. But these animals get visited every single day and moved. And there was a time when I would have said that's just impossible and it's crazy. Now I stand there and I think, well, it's a little crazy, but it is possible. And it's something that you will get hooked on it once you really start to look and think about the system. And you'll start to think about things like, that's tall fescue. Most of us are very familiar with that, but there's a lot more in the world than tall fescue. Crabgrass, used creatively, very, very good part of the system. Again, a lot of plants that we can use. Now, this has been changed a little bit on my own personal paradigm by going into the finished cattle business. So we are specifically cattle on our farm. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But once you start to try to finish animals on a forage-based system, a forage-based program, you start to realize that tall fescue is probably not the number one forage that you would choose. And so incorporating ryegrass, incorporating other high-quality forages into the system to help you achieve that system goal is very important. And we really think about finishing cattle performance from the time a calf is born, because it's about genetics and it's about all other kinds of things, and every day of their life is important if you're shooting for this long-term end of a very high-quality finished young animal. So a challenge. So let me show you a little bit about the farm, just so you know kind of what my daily world looks like. We have about 325 acres in pasture on this particular farm. The little dotted line with the circles, that's a cost-shared water system. That is the front half of the farm is dominated by that. The back half is pretty much undeveloped in terms of water, but we do a lot of laning back to water points that we have, various ponds, streams, that sort of thing, and we are in the process of developing the infrastructure across the whole farm. But I show this, and I'm going to show the next one. This is the big farm. This is our satellite site where we run finisher cattle, and you see there's 2 ponds there that are circled, and that's the only water on this farm. They lane back from various pastures, and again, they're moved every day. So the point is not that you shouldn't have infrastructure and make that development. The point is that the infrastructure doesn't have to come first. You can do a lot with what you have and then grow into it. Don't think, well, just because I don't have time to put a whole piped water system all over my farm, you can put up some polywire and lane, and once you start seeing the benefits, then you'll start thinking about how do we do water. And I think that was the big take-home message yesterday on the farm, is that that's kind of the next step to really improve their efficiency, but that they've done the right things first, which is to get interested in the ecological system and try to make it work. So kind of a good thing there. I will say there are key practices that I do believe are important for our farm. Maybe not yours, but I would say they probably are. But dispersed hay feeding has been the most important tool for us that we've ever adopted. So getting away from putting nutrients in one big pile and then finding places out on the farm that need the nutrients is important. You can tell that hill's got some broom straw and stuff on it. We've done extensive unrolling over the last 25 years on the farm, and we can really start to tell where we've unrolled a lot of hay. We can also tell where we haven't. And so we are sort of systematically finding those places and improving them, both with unrolling, which has been our traditional approach, but also with bale grazing. And bale grazing, we've been doing a little bit off and on for a really long time, but we're starting to make that a little bit more important part of our system, and glad that we're learning more about that, Greg, under your leadership, and I think that we're going to go far with the project that we have right now. But both of those practices are important, but they're just practices, okay? And the underlying principles don't change. So how you address that may be very different on your farm. It's going to be different on everybody's farm. This is it's one of those things where I was looking at the county GIS for some other reason. I was actually looking at a piece of property next to ours we were thinking about perhaps developing. And I came across this map, and I looked, and I first saw this top frame, and I thought, what in the world, some kind of crop circles or something? I didn't know what it was, but it was just weird. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is the bale graze. This is our pilot location, Greg. And you can see we were at a low density here, a high density here. And that same day, we happened to have this, the cow herd in the back part of the farm. This is from hay unrolling. And so this is where I've kind of got better at hay unrolling. We used to, this is a hill, and we used to unroll down the hill off a flatbed truck, and that was our standard practice. But when I got the little hay unroller, I was able to get back into all the corners and places where I could see broom straw and stuff, and really paint that organic matter on the landscape. And so very easy for you. You don't think about it. Anybody in here knows where those spots are on their farm and can start to put some attention and some animal impact on them. That's really important. Now, I'm going to go through this one fast, but we know that a good grazing system is good for profitability. We can reduce a lot of our costs. We can increase the life of our pastures. It's good for the health and well-being of our animals. It's good nutrition. It's good for disease in terms of exposure of small calves to mud, that sort of thing. And the bottom one there is it's a lot better for your mental health to be out there on grass in the winter instead of in deep mud. And everybody that has livestock knows what I'm talking about. And it's just a fundamental thing that we all appreciate. And then, of course, there are environmental benefits or the ecosystem services that are provided by these, including, reducing our runoff and improving water quality, thinking about the nutrient cycle and soil health. And so there's a whole lot of good to this, and it's amazing to me how sort of refractory our industry has been to realizing that. And yet we have growing audiences that are interested in this, as we have in the room today. So it's a very exciting time, I think, for us all to start to do a little bit better. Well, yeah. Okay, I had to throw this in, Ray. And appreciate Ray's story earlier, but I just want to say that Ray has had a big impact on me over my career. We got together probably 20 years ago, Ray, that we started and had those conflict times, that collision time, I'll call it. And Ray came and started teaching at our NRCS school, and I was when I heard about Ray and what he was doing and everything, I was a little scared, because I knew he was going to come in and stir things up real bad. And so, but what we found, obviously, is people will sit and listen to Ray and think about how this means in a bigger picture. So it was very important for our program to have him there. And the only problem was that Ray really was difficult to take for a young scientist who when he stood up and kind of made a general statement about scientists and academics and such, and I realized, oh, he's talking about me. And then it was kind of fighting words too. So anyway, just not to make it too long, but we have become very good friends, and I realized that to make progress, we have to have disruptions, okay? And so Ray, while Ray's not always right and he doesn't know everything, he is a good disruptor, okay? He will make you go home and think really hard about what you're doing, and so that's the purpose for having him here. So appreciate that. Now, Chris mentioned the changing terminology, and I will say that this is kind of dizzying because people come up to me all the time and say, hey, I heard about this new system. For example, AMP, grazing, which is the focus of the Roots So Deep. And I will say, see it. If you've not seen it, it'll be the best $20 you ever spent. 4 hours of time, but you will get a lot out of it. So I would recommend it for everybody in the room. AMP grazing. Well, what is that? I had somebody come up to me and say, why haven't you taught us about this AMP grazing? It's incredible. Well, that's what we've been talking about all these years. It's just a new name. So I won't read all of those, but through my career, these names have been put on the exact same system. So there is no easy answer. There's no way to clearly come up with one word. about it. But the one that we like the most is adaptive grazing management. And I'm just going to stick with calling it that and understanding that it's all of these things really are getting at the very same system. So let's talk about adaptive management, because we haven't talked about this yet, but adaptive management is very different than traditional management. And this is actually a concept taught in business school, because traditional management, if you think about it, you understand all of your inputs, you control them very carefully, you combine them in a very heavily engineered system, and you have a very predictable output. It's the way industrial manufacturing works, for example. Now, with systems like agriculture, there are a whole lot of things you can't control. You can't, outside of irrigation, you can't control the water. You can't control the land that you have and that sort of thing. So things are going to change, and you have to be ready to adapt to that. And it actually happens on a daily basis in these systems. So you have to have a long-term goal of where you're trying to go. We are, for example, trying to produce 750-pound carcasses that are mid-choice or better, and that's our goal. We have to do that to be successful. But how we're going to get there is going to change along the way from what we plan in the short term. So it's very important for things that you are ready to make that change on the fly. And if you think about that, this is the way farming used to always be. I mean, you had to be this way. And we've created a much more prescriptive, recipe-driven way of farming, and it just doesn't always work, especially with pasture-based systems. So, the long-term goal stays the same, but we've got to be ready to vary this path. So this is how you do it. And again, if you don't think this way, then go home and give it a little bit of thought. But you want to start by knowing what your resources are, knowing your context, and then set your system's goals. Develop a management plan, so know what you're doing, and then start to implement that. But immediately question whether or not you're doing the right thing. Look for indicators of success in what you did or failure, and then change what you're doing on a daily basis. So it becomes a loop. So the final goal doesn't change, but you continue to repeat that. Implement what you thought you should do. Go back the next day, look, learn, and then adapt. So just go into this learning process that is a continuous loop. And that's really what adaptive management is. Now this was, Ray, you showed this. There's several things in there that it's amazing that we ended up with the same quotes and such. I got this one from Johnny, and I won't say that anymore. The point is, you can get there a lot of different ways. There's not a single thing. You can say, well, you have to quit herbicides, or you have to quit. You don't. You have to figure out what's going to work on your farm in your context. So learn the principles, become interested in it, and then start thinking about what are the methods. Don't start with methods and then try to figure out principles after the fact. So I want to just say a few words about regenerative, because I think that this is a different concept for me from adaptive grazing management. Regenerative agriculture accepts the fact that a lot or most of our land is degraded, is in a degenerated state, and we could get back to where it's a whole lot better. The fact that we use a lot of inputs in agriculture is based on the concept that I was taught early on that really you'd be better off if you just had a sterile growth media and you could just put all the nutrients in the water and you would have a perfect system. I mean, I actually had some training on that. But the truth is that we can do a whole lot better without inputs if we will regenerate the land. And the way you have to do that is through building soil health. But the real place to start is decide that that's what you want to do. Okay, I'm going to regenerate this ground, and I'm going to start this lifetime journey of figuring out how to do that. That's the fundamental first step. So if you haven't done that yet on your farm, just realize there's not a single piece of ground probably that cannot improve by applying the principles that Ray and others have talked about. It's really a state of mind. Now, again, lots said about soil health. I won't get into the details of this. We know this. If you don't, there's lots of places to read about it. But think about the indicators. Do you look at your soil? Do you do the shovel test? Do you smell it? Are you looking for the biological activity as you go out there in your field? All of these things you can observe every day when you go out to pasture. And you really should be doing that to try to learn what's going on with your system. Now, we talked a lot about yesterday was all about ecology, and I really feel like we need to back up and think about what is it. And ecology, the strict definition, is basically the branch of science concerned with the interrelationships of the organisms and their environment. Now, pasture is what we call a managed ecosystem. And there really are very few truly natural systems left on the planet. But pastures are clearly a managed ecosystem. There's a human manager there. So a managed ecosystem is a system where humans actively intervene and control key aspects of the environment. And that's what we are doing. That is our role in these. And so this is you see lots of these kind of diagrams, very simplified, right? There's 10,000 organisms or millions on these that could be in here. But we try to pick out some of the most important ones. Now there's one that's absent from here. What is it? The manager, the human. And a lot of times we see these diagrams and that's just kind of left out. And I actually, we do have the human in this one. Let's see if I can. So, and it's you, right? But I think many of us think about it this way. And that is, all this stuff's inside the fence, and we're on the outside of the fence looking in, thinking we are in control of what's going on. Most of my clients do it from that position, and that they're actually sitting in a pickup truck as they go by, right? And the pastures look pretty good from the side. And that's just, it's a sad truth. And so really, literally and figuratively, you need to be right there, okay? And people that I work, a lot of people I work with, I don't have time to do that. I want a fence line feeder so I don't ever have to enter the pasture. I really just don't want to have to go out there and do that. And truthfully, unless you go there, you're going to miss out on all of this great complex stuff that's going on. For example, if you're right here and you're controlling this interaction, you can't help but look down and see dung beetles and stuff like that. And again, from outside the pasture, you may be able to do some things, but you can't appreciate the details of what's going on. So, where do you feel, think about your own self and your own farm. Where do you envision yourself, and where do you spend a lot of time? You need to be spending a lot of time on the ground, in the pasture, early on in this process so that you really understand what's going on. Lots been said about dung beetles. I really love them because they are something you can go out, you can find them, you can see them, and if you have never looked for them, you'll be surprised that they're probably on every one of your farms. If they're not there, it's an indicator that your system needs some work and needs some help. So you can study more about it. But encourage you really to go out and look for them. A lot of different little demos we've done over the years because we found this is probably the number one hook that we have found to get people to develop this keen interest is things like dung beetles. So we saw some of these demos yesterday, but certainly dung beetles really do a good job. And if you're not used to looking for them, this is a time to look for them is about middle of the summer. June, July is usually where the population of the ones that are really active come in. And when you see a fresh cow pie that's really roughed up like this, a lot of holes in it maybe or a very rough surface, scoop under it with a flat shovel, flip it up, and there they are. So this is predominantly Onthophagus taurus in this picture over here, and there's probably 300 or 400 dung beetles in that cow pie. Now the thing that was so shocking to me about this when I started working on dung beetles with a colleague there about 25 years ago is that they had been there all along. And I generally am interested and really fascinated by this kind of stuff, but I just didn't know. I was ignorant. I had never really thought about dung beetles and found that, gosh, they're everywhere. I just never looked for them. I never really realized that they were there. I was missing out on something because of observation. And there's about, there's underneath a cow pile like that, there's probably 100 little tunnels that are that macro pore that's going to help the water soak in and all of that. So look for them. If you've not done that, that's probably a great thing to do, and don't do it right now. You probably won't find very many, but in the summer you will see them. Now, think about the nutrient distribution on your farm. Everybody's farm is different, but we all have areas where animals have been concentrated for feeding, for one reason or another, maybe for other purposes. But we will find that any farm is unevenly loaded in nutrients. So this is our farm at Goldsboro at Center for Environmental Farming Systems that we mapped years ago now. 25 years ago we did this. And the blue and the green are very, very high phosphorus concentrations. Orange is deficient. And so you can kind of pick out different features on the landscape. I won't do that, but that little hole in the middle is where our headquarters are, and there's been a lot of hay feeding done all around that close to the gates. And so most of our farms will look like this. We'll have some data from Kentucky in probably a year or so that we'll be able to share with you like this as well. But you don't really have to have the colorful map to know where those spots are on your farm. So you can see it in the plants, you can see it in your understanding of the historical use of the land. So just be aware, nutrients are not evenly distributed on your farm probably, and that again invites you to some practices like bale grazing and such to pick the areas that really need the nutrients and stuff to start the biological activity. Again, that picture again, just because it helps me to think about my own context and what we're trying to do at home. Now, this is my main cow herd, and they get moved every day with polywire. And as I told folks yesterday, these cows are never a problem with single-strand polywire. In fact, we have almost all of our paddocks are made out of single-strand polywire. And we do a lot of daily moves with that. Now, again, a lot of farmers that have not managed like this say, there's no way I could do that with my herd. And that's not true, but it's going to take you a while. It's going to take you some good training, and you have to condition animals to this and understand that we started this 30 years ago. And so those cows were born to polywire, and their mamas were born to polywire. And the calves that are born this year, they respect polywire. They know what it is. It's a generational, cultural thing on the farm. And you will get there to that point. And it does simplify management. We'll talk a little bit about that. More importantly, this allows us to distribute, again, that manure evenly across the landscape. You see there's some animals back there in the back. This is a late fall, early winter scene. And we don't really back graze. We don't really back fence much during that time of year because we found that the animals almost always stay in the fresh cut. And as long as you're giving them enough on the front, they really don't go back and back graze over the back side for several weeks. So you can do this very, very, very quickly. Now the point is, this is the same hill where you saw all the unrolled hay traces there on that other slide. And this is a fall scene, but this is a spring scene. And every year this looks like this. This has not been had a legume on it, Chris, since 2000, so around 25 years. It has not had seeding done. Okay? But we have this ecotype of red clover that's developed naturally, and it almost acts as an annual. And we can't not have it if we graze those during the winter. Now, this land, if you understood, this is a big quartz rock mountain. This part of the farm back here, that's back on the big batch of trees on the top. I was out there with a group of NRCS folks, and it was when Soil Survey we've got web soil survey now. It's pretty easy to get, like, what's the characteristics of where we are right here. The NRCS person pulled out their phone, looked at that and said, Dr. Poore, the map says that this land is not suitable for agriculture, period. Well, not true, okay? So you can do a lot with very marginal land if you will, if you'll manage this way. And that's the only explanation for how this works. It's nutrients that have been brought in with hay, has not been done with fertilizer at all. No herbicides have been put on that part of the farm ever since we've owned it in the 70s. And that's partly why we have all of this legume out there. I mean, we just simply, it's a tool that we don't need to use, and we're not going to in that place. Now, I hate to ask for hands, but I'm going to do it. How many of you are using temporary fencing? Okay, about half probably. And this number goes up all the time. I mean, this is the key management tool. It is the way that you're going to be able to implement bale grazing, strip grazing, whatever you want to call it. It is critical. So learn how to manage this, learn how to keep very high power, and how to do this stuff quickly, because once you learn, you'll do it quick. So let me run through this a little bit. If you don't do it, and we're out there really promoting this, we're going to start a new educational program next year to highlight this concept of the power of one wire. There's a lot of stuff to this that you can get out of the wire besides just moving cattle around and getting better forage utilization. So we have a lot of more conventional cattle people that are interested in this. But basically what you can do is just start by splitting pastures. It's not anything, it's not rocket science, just, all you need is a reel and some posts and just start splitting those pastures up in half. And of course the perception is, well, I'm going to be out there chasing cows trying to get them to move, and you all that move cows know that's not true, but we have a very strong perception of that. But the truth is, when you walk down there and start to move the fence, the cows know what's going on, and they will walk right past you into the next piece. Now, that's not a small point. That's not an unimportant point. That seems simple, right? But remember that you're standing right there where that white dot is, and these animals are learning to walk right past you this close, and they start realizing, man, that's the best guy in the world. That's the guy that feeds me. And pretty soon they start to calm down, become your best friend, and then it starts to save you a ton of time trying to get animals up and that sort of thing. So by doing this, you have now doubled your stock density, you've increased the rest period, you've learned to use temporary fence, and you've started those cattle down that path of becoming cultured to it. And that's just simply by splitting pastures. Not going to take long at all. So a great way to start. Now, once you've done that, once you start getting into the culture of the power of one wire on the farm, if you have a lame cow or something like that, two people can take a reel out there between them, and you can take that cow right to the barn. Now you think, well, there's no power on that wire that you're carrying between you. They don't know that, and they are like, okay, I'm not gonna, and you can very gently move them to the barn without moving all the whole herd. Now, think of the benefits of that, because when you have you guys that have a pretty good sized herd of animals, and you know that we get a lame one, the first thing is like, oh my gosh, I think I'll just wait till tomorrow to try to do anything about that, because I'm busy. Okay, I'm in a hurry. Once you have this kind of an approach, you can do it right then. You have reel with you. You kind of know how to get to the barn. And wherever you are on the farm, you can start to use this to take care of those problems before they become a major problem. The quicker you take care of that, the better off you'll be. You'll also find there's other big benefits, and this is cattle working, which you can talk about. You could design the pen better or whatever to be worked with two people, but it used to take us about 5 people to work cattle, and that caused us a lot of problems because we only needed 3. Except when we had to get calves out of this pen. And so typically what would happen was we'd be working, my dad would be one of the non-needed ones at when we were at the chute, he'd tell all kinds of stories. We'd have all kinds of problems and related to that. So once we started using the wire like this to come in from the lead-up pen into the crowding pen, then 2 of us could work the cows. And it really solved a lot of those problems with, with having more people than you needed most of the time. So these kinds of things are really, really helpful. And you see there's no power on that fence, but those calves are going to go where you want them and not challenge it. So again, cultural. Well, I get this question a lot. If this was all so great, Dr. Poore, why isn't everybody doing it? It seems like they would. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. That top picture is my dad. And we got into it over this about 30 years ago. And he was like, oh, you young whippersnapper trying to tell me what to do or whatever. But I was like, Dad, just bear with me here. Let's try this. I was trying to, honestly, I was trying to accept it myself. But he was the one that was doing a lot of the management at that time, him and my mom. And so they agreed to do it for a few weeks just to humor me, I think, to move the cattle frequently. And so I went out there one day, and Dad was like, let's go move cows. He was like excited. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, let's go move cows. Come on. So we went out there, and he showed me what he'd done the day before. And he was so excited about it. But he had to be forced into trying it. So again, it's really understandable why people are so hesitant, because he'd been trained to do it a different way his entire life. And so we've got to be patient with those kind of folks. But if we're, I could have just left him behind and not tried, Ray, but I had to do it for my own personal reasons. And so they really bought into it. And so the last 20 years of my parents' life, they spent a lot of time out there moving cows with me and that sort of thing, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The bottom picture is my nephew, several of whom came to work with me over the years, and he was a city kid. He was not raised on the farm, and I told him our goal is to get manure evenly scattered over the land as much as possible. And I was off for a week, and he was strip grazing, and I came home, and he was so excited. He said, let's go to the back. Let's go to the back. I said, okay. So we went back, and he said, how did I do? He was so proud of that. But he didn't know any better. That's all he knew. And pretty quickly he was moving cows very frequently and believing in it. So we can do that. So it's important to view yourself as a grazier. I mean, we are out of the normal loop of the livestock industry at this point, but it's changing. So the traits of somebody who's successful at this, and I've seen people come and go, but the ones that stay in it are very open-minded. They stay flexible. They're not afraid to try something new, not afraid to make a mistake. Ray, I learned that from you. There's no mistakes. There's only opportunities to learn, right? So critically evaluate everything you do, and don't be afraid to say, well, I didn't do that right. Because you get to try again, over and over and over and over again. And if you move a few groups of animals every day for about 10 years, that's a lot of opportunities to learn. And you start to really learn a lot. Don't be too tied to one system or your plan or one method or whatever. Be flexible. And most importantly, stay interested in the system. It is fascinating. And once you really start to study it, you can stay into it for a long period of time. See without looking. Okay, I want to stress that a little bit because you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But this is one of the problems with ecology. There's a million little pieces of this puzzle. And reductionist science pulls a little component out and studies it so we clearly understand it. Now that's important. Because in the big system, it's impossible to study a single individual component. So we need to do that. But we have to back out and see the whole system. But what happens over time is that your brain starts to see the whole system. It sees the components, but it sees them as one system. And it's hard for me to explain that. But when I go to the pasture now, I don't look at residue, at biological activity, at residual forage and at forage availability in front, at the fill on the animals, their behavior. I don't look at those things anymore. I see them without looking. So was trying to explain this to Alan coming up the road, and so I'll throw the four-leaf clover. How many of you can just find a four-leaf clover about anywhere you walk out? Okay, a few people do. Okay, there's about one four-leaf clover in every 10,000 clovers. Something like that's the average. And it doesn't take very many square feet to make 10,000 clover leaves, does it, Ray? Maybe 100 square feet. So there's a four-leaf clover in this area. If you get down and look, you will never find it. Okay? If you look at the whole scene, it'll jump out at you. You can't look for it. You can't look at these little tiny components. You have to see them without looking. And it's something you train yourself to do over time. I can find four-leaf clovers, but it took me 20 years of looking till I gave up. And then I started seeing them. So it is an important concept. You have to enjoy and appreciate this. We've got a difficult world. Let's face it. I mean, if you watch the news if you watch the news every day, you'll be depressed. You'll go to bed depressed and wake up depressed, right? So we don't have much control over that. We need to vote, right? There's not a lot other than that we can do. But in my little pasture ecology world, if I keep my mind on that, it's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful world. There's no question that it's an incredible creation, and we need to appreciate it and not let outside forces make us think the world's a horrible place. Okay, the world is a wonderful place. The last one there is don't give up. Okay, this takes a long time. And if you think you're going to just spend 2 or 3 weeks doing this and see if it makes a difference, don't start. Okay, you will, if you go into this with the right attitude, develop the interest, then keep at it. Good things will happen, but don't get discouraged and don't give up. So how are you going to do this? Okay, and we all, whether we're well into it or just beginning, the first thing you have to do is decide, I want something different. Okay, that mud hole where we feed hay, Greg, that's how we're going to get people to bale graze, right? I don't want this anymore. You quoted a farmer that said, I'm not going to do this ever again. I'm going to do something different. We have to decide we want to change. So understand that system's complex and that you really need to learn about it. Associated with like-minded farmers. Here we are, right? But find you a local group that you can deal with. Most of my friends are conventional cattle people and they think this is crazy. But I got a handful, you Ray, that I can call when I really need to talk to somebody to get me excited about this. That man right there, he will answer my phone, which is, appreciate that. I called him the other day and I said, where have you been? He said, I've been in Dubai, man. Come with me next time. Oh my gosh. Okay. Electric fence. If you don't do that, do it. If you do it, learn how to do it better. Develop your long-term management plan and then upgrade your infrastructure. Use the programs and help build your farm, but know what you're doing before you start doing that. And I think, Sam, that was your best point, is that, once you build a whole thing and then you start learning, oh man, I wish that fence was over there or over there. I mean, study this a lot before you get extensive infrastructure. We have lots and lots of farms with lots of waterers, lots of pastures, and all the gates are open. Because those were people that had infrastructure before they had interest in managing. The last point there is, again, comes back up, don't give up. You have to give it some time and work on it for the long haul. So what are we going to do? Let's, when you go home, if you're not used to going out and looking at your pastures, I encourage you to do that. We have a system that NRCS has developed called pasture condition scoring. It's one of the most common sense and best approaches to kind of assessing the health of your pastures. So if you've not done that, there's a very good guide and a worksheet you can get off the web. And by doing that, you'll start to learn a lot about what you need to be thinking about, the different species and what they mean, and what the soil should look like and some of those kinds of things. So very good system for you to set some baseline for your pastures and think where we are now so that you can see improvements. If you can't identify the major forage species that you have on your farm, and I'm talking maybe the 10 or 15 most important ones, study those. You need to be able to learn those and identify them and know their traits. You need to be thinking about, is that desirable or undesirable in this context? Plantain. Sometimes it's desirable, sometimes it's not. But you need to be thinking about that as you go through and defining that for yourself. And we have a system called point step, which you walk along and you look at what's touching the tip of your boot every so many steps. It's easy to record that and then to have a good botanical composition estimate for your pasture. If you've not done that, it's a really great activity because it'll help you learn the plants. It'll tell you what's out there. And you'll be able to make a lot of other observations about bare ground and other things that you monitor when you do a step point analysis. So think about using that, and I'm going to tell you in a minute where you can get some more information on that. Now, this last little piece, we need to have hope for the future of this system, okay? Our farmers are aging. Our farm population is aging very, very dramatically. But now when we go and we talk about regenerative grazing, we have a conference with that title, the age of the audience, the average age goes down by about 10 to 15 years, okay? Young people are interested in regenerative agriculture. And so we love that because this is the next generation. This is a young man that works that works with us now. His name is Brandon Gale, but basically he's the next door neighbor to our farm. And he's a retired Marine. He just got out of the Marine Corps, spent 20 years in Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, did 5 tours. And he kind of wants to live in Virgilina, Virginia now, which is a very, very rural community, his home community. And he wants to raise livestock and farm. Okay, he's got some family land. And it just so happens it adjoins ours, and I don't have kids, and so I'm really interested in the future with this young family that's come to work with us. He doesn't have any of the preconceived notions about how things ought to be done, and he's got a very beautiful family that is all part of the operation. So they're if you're an older person and you don't know what's going to happen to your farm next, find young people to bring into it. Because the one thing I want in my life is I do not want my efforts to just grow back up into junk after I'm gone. And the key is to find young people that will join you, take your interest, and then carry it to the next level. And I fully expect this young family to do that. Now, I'm not much of a selfie kind of person, but I realized this was one of those scenes where I had to do it. And this is our finishers and developing replacement heifers on some of the best ryegrass we've had in a long time. These guys, we went through some pretty bad droughts and stuff early in their time, so this was the best grass that they'd ever had a chance to work on. But again, that's amazing grazing right there. Okay, it's the people, it's the grass, it's the animals, the technology, all of it going together, and the future right there of our farm. And so we all need to have this feeling. But the reason I really want to put this, and the thing I want to say is, I've got a complicated life. You know, academia is it's tough to actually go home happy every day, right? So this is my time, okay? In this situation, I feel true joy, the feeling of joy. And you all know what that is, right? I mean, you just kind of get this feeling in your heart, start to tear up like this is just too good to be true. And when we are in this situation, I feel that a lot. And that's, to me, that's the most important part of what we're doing there at home. So, I'm done. Basically, adaptive grazing management has great potential to help your farm. And with the value of livestock today, If you can figure out how to get good animal performance with low inputs, you're going to actually make money. I mean, you're actually going to have a very, very profitable type situation, which we're reinvesting all of that in infrastructure and improvements on the farm, but certainly we want you to start learning more about it today. So I'll just direct you to one thing in your proceedings. I did put the handout that we use at our field workshops. We used to carry a whole bunch of paper around with us. Now we just carry one that has links on it. So there is a QR code on that page, and if you'll go to that, all of these are live links. So the first page of that is a series of 12 webinar lectures on this topic, on pasture ecology. Basically, it's a short version of our national school. Dr. Franz Lubers has a presentation there, and we've got stuff on grazing horses and small ruminants and cattle and Power One wire, and all of that is in there. So if you want to, if you want something, that's all on YouTube, and you can watch all of those at no, that's all free stuff. And then there's a lot of other handouts and stuff you'll like on there. There is one there about doing the step point technique to do botanical composition. So look at that one if you don't do that. So, Chris, I think, yep, that's it. So